No, I am getting ready for the interview. Hey everybody, be with you in a second. Yes.
Is it Matt?
No, it's the live stream.
I'd like you to have a seat and shut up. We're going to do a brief interview and then we'll do a brief reading from the book. So thank you all for coming. And we're going to go ahead and get started.
There's no update.
Share some song.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming to Bob's today, and hi everyone joining on the live stream. My name is Ray, and Bob and I have been friends for, I don't know, like a decade-ish. And so,
It's been a decade, hasn't it?
yeah, we're old. We're really old. And so, probably at least since the day I met you, you've been writing a book. And so, as many of you who may be friends with writers know, when you're writing a book, you have no idea what the book is about. You're probably in it, so you're like kind of on your best behavior for a while, you know. And so seeing this beautiful thing be done is like really impressive, and we're all really proud of you. And so I just wanted to say congratulations, and we're all really impressed, and give Bob a round of applause. So
I don't know how I'm going to keep everybody on their best behavior now.
yeah, no, you have no leverage over us anymore. Sorry, we all just have to be ourselves. So I assume all of us have read the book, and so Michael and myself and Bob, we thought of some questions and sort of like a debrief that we could all use. And so, well, here it goes. So one of the takeaways in the book that we had talked about was the question of villains. And so we all have our own impression of who the villain in the book is. And so I just wanted to hear from you, Bob. Who's the villain in this book?
I like to think that there isn't one. I mean, there are people who do acts which one might consider reprehensible. There are things that I would not personally condone or do myself, but at some point or other, I've tried to understand and identify with each character in the book. So I really think that I try to make sure there was a very conscious effort to say, like, this person is consistent with their own perspective. Their perspective does not consist of, I am the opposite of this person. I am the anti-hero, or I'm the person who's opposite that. But I did try to make sure that if you read through the book and you look closely at what some of the people are doing, you can hopefully look into their minds and sort of understand why they came to think that way. And extrapolate backwards into sort of what circumstances might have led to it. By the way, to anybody who hasn't actually read the book yet, this is going to be a spoiler-free zone. So I'm careful about that because I am sensitive to spoilers myself.
So we're we kind of alluded to this when I've been, kind of joking that you've been writing this book for 10 years. But really, how much has changed since when you started writing this book to when you finished?
There was no such thing as Facebook. Let's start there.
And oh my God, we are so old that, we were like sophomores when Facebook came out.
Yeah, I mean, Facebook as an idea at a few select universities existed when I started to write the book. Mm-hmm. But the book itself is set in 1999, so Facebook didn't even exist when it was taking place. And one of my favorite moments in the book, or at least to write just because of the word, is that I got to have someone say they were going to call someone on their cellular telephone. The object has changed and the idea has changed, but the language has changed wildly. And if someone walked up to you and said, "Can I borrow your cellular telephone today?" you'd be like, "Who are you? What is this?"
Get back in your phone.
So, I mean, a lot has changed in the process of writing the book, not just in technology and the background stuff, but also obviously, this is a book about a group of gay kids in college, and that experience has wildly changed everywhere for gay people everywhere. And I actually, over the course of the 10 years, had kind of stepped away a couple of times and said, is this really still going to be relevant? So, like, nothing applies anymore. But then on June 26th of last year, when we got gay marriage, things changed a little bit. And I started to sort of realize that this is a piece of historical fiction. So it's not meant to reflect the way gay culture looks today. It's not meant to really reflect the way gay culture looked 5 years ago. It's meant to be a snapshot of now 15 years ago and saying how much has changed, what did things look like in the wake of the attack on Matthew Shepard.
Very detailed, and that you've memorized the order of these questions.
I did not memorize them.
So, you talk about the book being an allegory for the late 90s gay movement, and a lot of us, when I'm reading it, I'm like, oh my god, this is so queer as folk, right? So can you talk a little bit more about that and the intentionality behind it, and how that time frame specifically inspired this piece?
Yeah, so first I'll say this book is in no way affiliated with the show. Really, I tried to take a distant look, kind of take a step back and look at the gay movement in the 90s from an outsider's perspective, partly because I arrived on the scene in 2003, so I'm already coming at from like half an outsider's perspective, because so much changed. I mean, like, other movements, you look at them like decade by decade. If you look at the gay movement decade by decade, you'd be like, bloop, bloop, what happened? Oh, and we're done. Like, a lot of things changed over that period, and so I tried to take a step back and look at it from an outsider's perspective and see what was building out of it, what was causing some of the elements of it, what some of the major problems are. I mean, one thing that you'll find as you read the book is that gay liberals can be offensive too. There are a lot of perspectives in there that you I try to understand where they come from, but they're not healthy. They're not good things to see. It's a little exclusive of women. It's very exclusive of race. It's a small group of white gay men who are for the first time really experiencing oppression, and they're like, "What oppression is terrible!" And they have no perspective that, like, outside of their circle, oh, this has been going on for a while. Other people also feel oppression and bad things, and so they sort of look at the world through their own limited perspective, and that's where a lot of what ends up happening comes from.
Since it is Pride, and not everyone has read the book, even though we love you dearly. So maybe I would like to dig a little deeper on that and talk about the GLBT movement where it is today and how some of those struggles do still exist. And if you think readers today who are a little younger and who don't really remember that kind of stuff very vividly and don't have a lot of other points of reference for it, what messages can they take away from that struggle when they look at what's happening today with even different really powerful GLBT organizations?
There's a thing that I think as people in general that we do that drives me crazy, that every time, like, the march of progress and equal rights and trying to understand each other's perspective happens in weird, slow, isolated steps. It's like every group that gets through and is like, we're going to have equal rights, we're going to be we're going to be recognized as full people, as people with the full set of rights and abilities and everything that everyone else should have, and everyone understands my perspective at least enough that we can work together and live together and everything. As soon as that group gets through the door, they shut it behind them, and that's what seems to happen. And, like, right now we're seeing the same thing happen with bisexual people and transgender people, where in the moment of June 26, 2015, we saw a splintering of the movement. And a lot of people who were supporting gay rights were really just there until they got their own personal marriage certificates, or until gays got marriage certificates in general, and then they're like, so we're done, right? Like, party's over, we can go home, we're all set. I think it's important to recognize that you can't shut the door behind you. You have to think about who comes next, and the big struggle that I think we're all going to face over the course of the next generation is the ability to stop and take stock for how much what we do and how we feel affects the life experience of someone else. And we can do it group by group, or we can finally learn the lesson that children's cartoons have been trying to teach us for 30 years and listen to other people's perspectives and try and better understand them and say, I don't quite get, I can't ever experience what you're telling me about, but I should stop and listen and maybe defer to you a little bit when it comes to discussions about how we treat you and how we help you get where you want to go.
That's a really good segue into the theme of parenting, which is a really strong one in the book, and also for some of us personally who are parents. Can you talk a little bit more about that theme, and also, since your lovely parents are here, some may be hassling me in the corner. Can you lift up a little bit about the role of parenting in the novel, and also its positive impact on your life, obviously?
Yeah. So the first thing that I want to say, and is that the dedication of the book is very true. That my parents are so far better than any of the parents in the book. Also, the parents in the book are largely bad, but I had
no spoilers.
Retroactive spoiler alert. No, I mean I was extraordinarily lucky, and I recognize that. And a little part of writing this book was sort of unpacking that for myself and saying, what if I hadn't had good parents? What if my parents had been otherwise good, but they just couldn't wrap their minds around having a gay kid? Or what if my parents had been otherwise good, but this was like a fundamental violation of their religion, and like what's going to happen there? And some of it was I had seen that happen to friends of mine and to people I talked to, and just sort of understanding the influence of that is a major part of the book. Things have changed a lot since 1999. Number one, the number of people who get upset about people being gay or who understand it as a biological imperative has grown wildly, and that has fundamentally changed things. But the one thing that I would say, and I absolutely try never to give parenting advice because I'm woefully unqualified to do so, but as a former gay kid and on behalf of lots of former gay kids, the one ask that I think I would make of parents is prepare yourself for the coming out conversation. And if you can, if it's possible, preempt it. Because if your kid comes out to you, the first 5 words out of your mouth, they will remember forever. And beyond that, but leading up to that conversation, they've been stressing a lot. They've been thinking about a lot. And if you can sit them down and say, before they have a chance to even talk to you, and say, I don't care, just be yourself and be happy. It can make a huge difference. If they turn out not to be gay, then it was kind of a message that would have been nice for them to hear anyway. But if they do turn out to be gay or bisexual or transgender or have some other thing about themselves that they're not sure of, they're still defining or finding for themselves, that 2-second, probably awkward conversation will end up being a huge deal for them. So that's just the one thing I would say is that if you preempt the conversation, you're robbing them of some drama, but that's okay.
Little drama, lots of love. So, we talked a little bit about we're getting back into more of the personal reasons why you wrote it. And one of the really interesting pieces that I found when reading it was like reading a news story, right? And that was really intentional. Can you talk a little bit more about the journalistic structure and why you chose that route?
Well, again, like we said before, there was an opportunity that I tried to exploit where I stepped back. I said, I want to look at this from the perspective of an outsider, and I want to tell the story from the perspective of an outsider. it was very important to me that I was able to put it in the lens where each person's motivations could be dissected, but not by some omniscient narrator, but by someone else in the story who sees them, who experiences the things together. And it made it digestible too. So it takes it, each chapter is actually only about 1,000 to 1,500 words. The original concept was that the book exists as a series of pieces that would have been run in the student newspaper over the course of actually probably a year or two by the student journalist who is our narrator in the book. And I wanted to dissect it that way and have it be episodic, so it feels like you're going from one step to the next, even if it jumps around in time a little bit. The literary journalism style has always been a huge plus for me because it allows me to relay facts and dialogue in a way that is interesting to read, but still very dedicated to putting you in the scene of what's happening.
And we can name drop Bill O'Connell.
Yes.
Because, yeah.
He's pretty much just in the book. I don't know if he's watching right now, but
he will be. We'll send it to him.
So yeah, I mean that's kind of where we were going. That's what I wanted to take away from it is just I wanted to give an outsider's perspective that was not my own, and putting it into that voice forced me never to just preach through the book, which I knew was a kind of a big danger. Because you all know me, you know I like to talk. What? So, I mean, it was definitely a consideration where it was like, I need to make sure that if there's a message that I want to get through, I have to run it through a couple of filters and make sure that it comes from an authentic character's voice. I don't just suddenly step in and say, what he's doing here is bad, everybody. This is bad, and this is how you do it. So.
Well, but it took you a little while to get to that point, right? You know, a decade is a long time.
I wrote chapter 1 9 times. It was important to me to get the voice down before I started hitting the road and going for it, because I didn't want to write chapter 2, 4, 6, 12 all 9 times. One of them ended up being a screenplay. One was a script for a graphic novel. Never got past the script, so don't expect anything cool looking to come out later. So, I mean, I tried it in a lot of different ways. I knew the basic story that I wanted to tell, but the precise form and voice that it took a lot of trial and error.
What was your favorite part to write?
The sermons. The sermons were my favorite part to write. I got to research Jonathan Edwards, the puritanical preacher. I got to reference Martin Luther King a little bit, and Malcolm X. I got to reference, I listened to a lot of Baptist preachers for that section. But it's very florid prose that I don't often get to write, because if you write it for more than 2 paragraphs, people are like, I'm tuning this out. So it was definitely an opportunity to sort of delve into that for a short period and then come back to reality. So yeah, those were my favorite parts to write.
What about your favorite parts to read?
Chapter 2 and chapter 25.
Why?
Chapter 2 is very autobiographical. I love pancakes.
True. I knew this guy.
Chapter 25, both of them really share moments of peace. And those are always pleasurable for me to read and enjoy, where somebody is going through usually the drama that a novel inflicts upon a person, and they get just a moment to like abstract from that and breathe deep. And when I read those moments, I get to live them too. So like if I'm going through the emotional experience with the character, to then be able to read it and be like, so like if I could, I don't know, put chapter 2 and chapter 25 on a loop, I would like listen to them and relax throughout the day.
So Michael has a couple of questions, and for people who don't know, Michael is your roommate, who's also, we all went to college together, and so the backdrop of the story is something that's all very familiar to us, and we invoke a lot of different feelings around that. So I wanted to ask a couple of Michael's questions since he couldn't be here today and is sadly stuck at work. So Michael asks, you mentioned in the story you mentioned recently that you wrote the story over a 2-year period, like actually really buckling down and getting it out, and you finished soon after you started. So, can you explain a little bit for folks who are not writers, a little bit more about that process? When we say Bob's been writing a book for 10 years, we don't mean like 9 to 5, Bob's been in a dark room just typing, right? Yeah. So just explain a little bit more about the process and sort of how cathartic it was for you personally, and also to tell it from a different perspective.
So it was definitely something where I always knew this was going to be the biggest project I'd ever attempted. It was the longest thing I'd ever written. And I knew from the start it was going to have 27 chapters. So I had nailed that down. From there, it was a lot of sort of filling in the blanks of the outline. For me, it was very cathartic because it is extrapolated from an autobiography, almost a fantastical autobiography. Like, I didn't do it. Let me put this out there for everyone. I did not do the things that they say in the book. There are some of the things that they do in the book that I might have wanted to do at times, but it was definitely something where it was a lot of what ifs and playing out some of the feelings, and trying to get that out there. Like, yes, this book is a little bit therapeutic, is what I'll say. But as far as process, I've always been a data and progress driven kind of person. And anyone who was friends with me on Facebook over the last 3 years especially, every time I would update a particular chapter up a stage, so I had written a first draft or I had sent it to a reviewer and gotten it back, I would update a spreadsheet that calculated a percentage of how complete the novel was. And it was down to the 10th of a percentage point. It was like, my novel is 48.33% complete. Because part of seeing that number go forward helped me make sure that I was feeling rewarded for accomplishing parts of literally the biggest project I'd ever attempted. And I also, what was important for me was technologically, and this is for anybody who wants to do writing, I used a lot of Google Drive and cloud services so that if I had an idea, I could pull it up on my phone, I could pull it up on the iPad, I could pull it up on a laptop, anywhere with an internet connection, and jot it down in the specific document where it needed to go. If I had an idea for chapter 15, I pulled up chapter 15 and I put it in. Or if I wanted to make edits, I could do that on a commute, I could do that on vacation, I could do that from anywhere with an active internet connection.
I'm going to ask you kind of a fun question. So, as someone who's been to Somewhere in Time with you, which is where you are in the book, if we... no, just a landmark. Part of the backdrop. What would you order if we went to Somewhere in Time today?
A taxi?
Totally fair.
Yeah, I mean, when I was there, I used to drink the strongest Cosmos that ever existed. These days, I would take a look at their glasses and see how clean they are. Decide what I wanted. But actually, the Somewhere in Time that I described in the book no longer exists because, 5 years after I left, they had a huge fire. And I had to rebuild after it.
Not your fault, of course.
No. Somewhere in Time was the respite. It's not where I would burn down. I mean, I would never burn down anything. No, I mean, I would be curious to see what it looks like if it still conforms to the formula I had devised for small town gay bars.
Yeah.
Read the book to find out.
And then my last question is, because I want to have time to mingle and get to know everyone and have everyone ask their individual questions of you, is what's the one thing that you think someone who is you 10 years ago and who picks up your book today, who's feeling all of those same struggles and all of those same insecurities and feeling all those questions, what is the one thing you would want them to take away from reading this?
Don't do what the book says. No, I would say the biggest takeaway for me, having finished the book, and what I would hope a reader would take away too, is how much things have gotten better since the book begins. I mean, it gets better, applies to personal stories and individual people, but since 1999 to 2016, I mean, in 1999, it was still illegal in most of America for gay people to have sex in their own homes. Like, it wasn't until 2003 that Lawrence v. Texas in the Supreme Court overturned that as a privacy measure. And that's how much things have changed. Like, I think it was 37 states still had laws on the books against it. And so I know there are a lot of struggles that are still out there, and we can't give up. We need to keep working. But if you look at the last 15 years, you can feel accomplished. Hopefully you had some part of it, but you can feel accomplished. You can feel like a lot has changed, and it can only move forward from here. So.
Thank you, Bob.
We have a couple minutes if anybody else wants to ask questions. Otherwise, I'm going to start reading chapter 1.
I have a question.
Sure.
Having lived through a small school in Western Ohio for undergrad and being homosexual at the time, and still am, I wonder, with how different things are today, I just don't know anyone who's experienced college within the last 4 years in those places. So my hope is that no one has had to endure what we did, but my feeling is that probably a lot of them still are.
Yeah. I mean, I also, don't have data really on what the experience has been for college students in rural areas. I know one of the books that has helped me get a better understanding of the generation that is following ours is called The New Gay Teenager by Richard C. Savin Williams. It is filled with a lot of data, a lot of personal interviews, a lot of focus groups and studies that he conducted. And what it shows is, and part of the reason I say it can only move forward, is that the next generation of people don't understand this as an issue. They fundamentally don't even get what the problem is when people have an issue with it. And there are some people who are living in and were raised in more isolated areas or isolated families, and their religious background does still tend to push them in the other direction, but generationally they are a much smaller percentage, and they actually may be having some of the same isolation issues that we had 15 years ago. So I would imagine that they still butt heads occasionally with older people, faculty members, and certainly people who live in the area and have lived in the area. But as far as their peers, I think that has fundamentally changed. And I don't think it is capable of going back.
I think Josh brings up a really good point, and that is that, we're a little further out from college, and so some of the good stuff and some of the trauma, has kind of worn off a little bit for us, and so we have a different perspective based on where we've moved or where we've lived or who we choose to surround ourselves with. And some people don't have that choice yet. So I think especially since it's Pride Month in DC and a lot of other places, now's a really good time to encourage folks who are not sure or really confused or feeling isolated to reach out to national organizations or local organizations, their PFLAG chapters, their really nice ministers. Like, some are really nice, and you should be able to sort of find those resources. And I think going to places like the Trevor Project and the Human Rights Campaign and the LGBTQ Task Force and GLAAD, and sort of looking at those national places and then finding some support is really important. And I think Josh brings up a really good point.
Yeah, there's a church about a quarter mile from here that I think it's Presbyterian, and I'm pretty sure that their sign has been getting more and more rainbowy over time. At first,
It's
it
gonna
was
be the
like
whole front.
it is
next
now.
year.
Actually, there was like a little rainbow sticker in the front, and it said something about open doors and open door policy. And then that rainbow sticker grew into like a more permanent installation. And I swear, I walked by there like a week ago, and they had taken out the monument sign, and it was just this big old banner that was just a rainbow. And I was like, all right, guys, I get it, it's Pride. What are you gonna do in July? So I definitely think there are more welcoming organizations. There are some that will still struggle, and if you can get away from those, do so. But that's it. So I think if we want to, I'm going to go grab a copy of the book, which I probably should have brought with me, and here we go. So this is chapter 1, because I'm not giving away anything else. This is the room. Aaron knows it instinctively. This motel bed is the one that held Seth the night before. It is our 4th night, and we are now 1 day behind. Aaron prepares the bed and undresses with practiced precision. He peels back the corner of the sheets at a careful angle, even though they wrinkle and shift with every move. The motel sheets and rough wool blanket fold off the corner to a crisp triangle. His slender frame is only bare a moment. As he surrounds the pillow with both hands and collapses immediately into sleep, I wonder what it must feel like to come to your lover's bed a day too late. As Aaron sleeps, I begin to organize my notes from the car ride today. It is less work than the day before. After Christmas of last year, Aaron Gallagher and Seth McCann went to Ireland by themselves. Gallagher characterizes the trip as a terrible mistake, a series of terrible mistakes. Gallagher had been 4 times with his family. McCann had never left the continental U.S. For one thing, Gallagher said, December is not the best time to travel to Ireland. It's not as cold as you think that far north, but it is dark most of the time. Dark? In summer, the sun can set as late as 10 at night, but we pay for it in the winter. Nights are not especially cold compared to America, but they are very long, so Seth and I didn't get in much sightseeing. Gallagher has no brogue or red hair, but his kinship to the Isle is clear, even before knowing his surname. How long did you stay? A week. We came back to classes 3 days late just to get back. What did you do? I visited my family. Seth slept a lot. His headaches were bad that first weekend. He had to go to the hospital one night. He went to the hospital for headaches? Actually, he blacked out for a moment. He tried to cover up, say that he was feeling better one night, and, well, it got the better of him, and he blacked out on me. I panicked and took him to the hospital. They didn't do too many tests. I'm not sure they believed me that it wasn't the alcohol. You have been drinking. Yeah, but only a little. We hadn't had that much. Couldn't Seth have had some you weren't aware of? I was boring. I can't extrapolate or imagine Aaron's reaction in the moment of these events. In the car, with me, Aaron was giving an indifferent confession. Whatever catharsis that came with this thing had already happened or had yet to. I never imagined big stories happened like this. It was always my understanding that even contrived stories were wrapped with emotion, that sensational headlines were born that way. But this was not calculated. His narrative was a summation of the events, point by point. He had been with Seth, now he was driving halfway across the country to find Seth again, and telling me the story of the in-between. I stop the tape and pull off my headphones. My hand is cramping. Nearly everything around us is stained brown, and feels as though it was made before 1975. The floor-to-ceiling wood paneling clinches the motif. It is unlikely, even when the wainscoting was first installed, that it concealed the imperfections in the wall. Now, the warped lines in the plywood are a contour map to every water-stained bulge in the room's thin walls. The dresser is worn and battered in one corner. It looks as though someone paid lip service to refinishing it several years ago. There are layers of carvings in it, initials, names, and random scratch marks laid in over time, and so it is hard to pick out the fresh pentagram, except that there is still sawdust in the engraving. The loud heating unit beneath the window of the room grumbles to life. The machine's waking noise is full of clicks it shouldn't have, but hot air emerges nonetheless. A sliver of the darkness outside appears every minute or so. The rigid polyester curtains wave in and out as one unit, having been starched into oblivion. I open them. Outside the glass is a boy our age walking by with an ice bucket. It is startling to both of us, and I freeze while my heart pumps heavily. Though I did not see him approach, I imagine he continues quicker than he came until he reaches his room. I close the curtains again. It's the adrenaline that reminds me how tired I am. My mind is fogged from lack of sleep, and no amount of caffeine will clear it. I cannot sleep, however. I start the tape and put my headphones back on. So the hospital thought he had passed out from drinking? Seth wasn't helping my argument. He was coming back from the second vision. The what? In my bag on the back seat, pull out the black and white composition book. Seth McCann kept 3 journals. Each book was an unwitting gift from the parents in his life. 12-year-old McCann dropped a composition book in the cart while shopping with his mother, and so purchased himself a book to record his dreams. At 16, seeing a gift from Dylan Gallagher unused on Aaron's shelf, he had taken a hardcover blank book to record his daily activities. And finally, or firstly, as the date is unknown, he took an old, worn, and leather-bound volume from his father and began to write in it as well. The log of McCann's life is ordinary. Regular entries and consistent handwriting, all in the same pen kept clipped to the book. Entries are dated about 3 to a week. There is no mechanical regularity to their spacing. The last entry is mid-August before he entered college, but there's no indication that it was intended as a final entry. The book of his dreams doesn't begin as unusual either. It is full of the anxieties and anxious fantasies one would expect the 12 to 18-year-old to have. Having sex, losing his mother, being teased at school, etc. In the journal, Seth's ability to describe the dreams quickly grows in memory, vocabulary, and style, while his handwriting does not. It is inconsistent, scratched down in a bleary rush with whatever was handy. The final 2 entries in Seth's dream are called visions. The final entry, second vision, is as follows. I am being buried alive. I am lying naked in the ground. The hole is shallow and being filled in with white snow and earth. The figure with the shovel is obscured, and I see wings on his back and a key at his belt. I cannot speak or scream. The figure continues to shovel. The key is bronze. It is oxidized and warped. Spots are blackened and others covered in a fine white ash. The key is one of 3. The shovel is old, blade rusted by soil and chipped by stone, smooth where hands have held it before, rough and dirt covered everywhere else. But the figure's hands do not match. They are wrinkled, but not calloused or hardened. They are my father's hands. Now I see his face clearly. It is dead. His eyes are sunken and purple, and his face is smeared with dirt. Snow and earth falls on my face again and again until the world turns dark. He was yelling about it when we brought him into the hospital. It didn't help my case much. I can imagine. For the first time, Aaron's face was stern. He did not look from the road, but written in profile was the weight of what had happened to him and the fear playing underneath. He continued to drive. You should read more of the journals. June 6, 1996. I remembered the time she took me out of school in 3rd grade. It wasn't a whole memory, I don't think. Lots of the day I don't remember. But I remembered she showed up early in the morning in the classroom, called to me and came, and the teacher asked what was going on, and she said I wasn't feeling well. The teacher tried to have a talk with her outside of class, but she laughed and told me to come with her. I don't remember where we went that day, but I remember the look on the teacher's face and my mother's laugh. She used to take me out of class a lot like that when she was between jobs. I grabbed the journal again from the artifacts Aaron brought. A picture stuffed in the book presents itself when I turn the page, not having been pasted, but seemingly stuffed in instead. Whether as a bookmark or hiding place is unclear. Aaron is the center, but not the focus of the photo, asleep next to Seth, who is smiling obnoxiously and holding the camera at arm's length. Seth's smile is wide, an unusual shape, uneven and captivating. Much the same way as eyes directed at a lens will follow the viewer, Seth's smile seems pointed in a single direction at me. Both boys are also apparently naked in the photo, Aaron presumably without his knowledge. The relationship between Aaron Gallagher and Seth McCann is unusual in many ways. The boys share a bed nightly. Far more unusual is the fact that the boys have never, as Aaron puts it, successfully had sex with each other. I do not know why his frankness in that conversation is so unnerving. They are the kind of best friends who do not remember the first time they met. It was so far in their infancy. As a very young child, Aaron spent many afternoons and evenings at Seth's house, his parents working late in direct contrast with the McCanns, Matthew always arriving shortly after the end of school, and Caitlin often home all day anyway. Aaron remembers enjoying most of the times when both Seth's parents were at home and with each other. It was often the only time he had alone with Seth, not under his father's watchful eye or his mother's constant intercession into play. Seth did not come to the Gallagher household except on Aaron's birthday. It wasn't a rule, at least not a written one, but whenever Aaron would invite Seth, there would be an excuse not to come or not to get together at all. Over the years, Aaron never questioned it. In the far bed, Aaron looks precisely the same as the picture, at least until his mouth starts to hang open, and he drools more than a little. I lose the pages the photo was stuck between, and decide if I'm going to remember any of this or function in the morning. Sleep is going to be required. Alright, well, thank you all again for coming. I'm now going to migrate to room at the far end, where books will be available for purchase. It's also available on Amazon and on Kindle and on audiobook through audible.com. And I think it just went live on iTunes if you prefer to listen to your audiobooks through that. So, thank you all for coming. And thank you guys too.